Hello, everyone. Today we're going to do a ultraKEY demonstration here. That is where we're going to choose a color within the background of a certain piece of footage and transform it from being a solid color to being transparent. Now, that's a way to describe what we're going to do in terms of the software. In layman's terms, we're going to do what's called a chroma key isolation. So we would record footage on a green screen, for instance, which is what we're doing, and then we're going to identify that green color and then assign that green color a transparency of 0. So that's basically what we're going to be doing. So let me go ahead and share screen and get to the demonstration. So let's go with the desktop there, and yes, share. Okay. So here we have the basic setup here for our PrPro project. And what I have right now is a background setup on the timeline. I have a regular sequence set up at 23.976 frames, which is our standard 24 frames a second if you want to round it off. This is just a still image that I've used, and we chose this still image prior to shooting any footage. That's important when you're doing this kind of work, is to know what your background is going to be before you set up the footage that's going to be overlaid on it. Otherwise, you're having to do it in reverse. If you shoot the footage in the studio first, then you're stuck with trying to match that footage later on, which can be quite a challenge if you are doing something on location or outside to try to do that. So it's a much better process to choose your environment, create the environment, however you're going to do that, and then match the lighting and match the perspective in the studio. That's a much more fluid way to go about doing it. So I have the footage laid in here already, sequence. You can see also I have an adjustment layer here, which is blank right now. There's nothing there on it. I'll demonstrate that a little bit later on as well. We'll go to File and Import to import that chroma key footage. As I have been instructing all along, we want to make sure that we are creating the root folders, which I have done, ultraKEY, and that we are choosing the footage according to or we are placing the footage into those root folders. All of the material that we're otherwise going to be using should be inside that folder that we would be using. So here's the chroma key footage that we shot, and we will go ahead and hit the import on there. And now I'm going to just simply inspect that footage. As you can see, there I am. And I'm in a green background. Now, the green background is not lit exactly perfect. And that had to do with the scale of the green key, the screen itself, which is quite large, and also the lighting that we had available in the studio. We did not have enough lighting to light the green screen to the luminosity that I would have preferred, or to be able to cover it completely. However, that won't be too much of a problem. We'll be able to correct that as we go. So I have the footage, so let's go ahead and bring that right down into the timeline. Now I'm going to place it sort of in the middle there because I do enter the scene at a certain point here. And so I'm going to scroll a little bit off here and trim a little bit of that footage away. So you can see that I enter into the scene here, and I look around, and then I kind of come to the end there, and I'll trim the scene there, give myself a little less footage here. So basically just doing rough cuts here in order to give myself a little bit better of a short timeline here. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and select that, basically activate the footage into the source window right up here. We'll go to Effect Controls, and as you can see, I've got all these different things that we are familiar with inside the Effect Controls. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to toggle all of these arrows closed so that we're not looking at them. And then down into the bin, the materials bin, I'm going to choose effects. Now, sometimes based on your windows, you might not see this right there. You might have to go to these double arrows and click and scroll down to them. You can find it there if your windows are too small. So inside of effects, you'll see you have a lot of different choices. We're going for video effects. You also have things like audio and so on. We're going to go to video effects. And then, of course, what we're talking about is something called keying, which is we're going to key out a certain portion of our video. This is like masking, but instead of drawing a shape, we're going to select a color. So we're open up keying, toggle it open, and we're going to choose the Ultra key. So we have our footage activated. We're down in Ultra key right here, and we'll double click to activate it. Now, right now, black is what we have activated. You can see here, Ultra key, and we have black as the color that has been identified. So you can see very closely here, if we look kind of closely, you can see that the shirt that I'm wearing, although it's blue, still has some black that's actually identified in it because it's so dark. So you can see it sort of becomes clear. We don't want that, of course. We want to make it green. So what we will choose is the eyedropper, and then we'll scroll over to the screen itself, and we'll choose one of the areas. Now, a good place to go is going to be, let me go ahead and zoom out here. A good place to go is going to be one of the darker areas here. So I'm going to choose here, and because our screen isn't totally balanced, we're going to choose one of the green areas. And you can see that it does its job in terms of clearing it, but you can see I have some information here as well. I can choose other areas by just selecting the screen and choosing different points. What it's doing, once again, is when I hit that eyedropper and I choose that color, we're identifying that color as being transparent. We're saying, okay, Premiere, make that color instead of that chroma green, make it transparent, just that color. If that color existed in my shirt or I had glasses on that were green, it would disappear just the same. It would be transparent. And so I could have a floating head. If I was wearing a green, chroma green shirt, I could just be floating there. So it's kind of interesting how that could work. If I was wearing a completely green suit covering my head and hands and everything, I could be walking around with something and it would appear that it's floating around and whatnot. So there's just the beginning, and just even that in and of itself does not a bad job of getting rid of most of what we're looking to get rid of. But we can fine tune a little bit more if we choose to fine tune, if we really look at that. We have other settings, as you can see here. We have matte generation, cleanup, spill suppression, and so on. Matte generation is really where all of the settings are for that mask, for the keying out. So that's where we might want to do a little bit of work. So let's go ahead and fit this back into the screen here. And to be able to really see this, let's go to, instead of composite, which is showing us the finished look, let's go to alpha channel, which actually shows us quite a bit of the information. And you'll see that I have a way of seeing it now that allows me to see exactly what's being keyed out. Now, black represents transparent completely. So you can see it is black just around me. And as I scroll around, you can see as I move that it's not exactly covering everything. You can see here, all around here, there would still be a little bit of that. Now, the background is quite dark, so it's sort of hiding it. If I go back to composite, you can see it's sort of hiding it. But if I really look closely, you would see a little bit of static. If we look kind of like right up here in the area, you'll see there's a little bit of static that's happening there. So we'll do what we can to get rid of that. So we have some controls here where we can start to move things around. We have things like the transparency that we could adjust. You can reset any of these, by the way, just by hitting the mask there. You have highlights, you have shadows, you have the tolerance itself, which you can move back and forth. Some of it's going to affect your mask and some of it won't. Now watch when I use the pedestal, it's going to increase the range of this quite a bit. So I'm going to actually max that out, which gets me pretty far away from everything there. So now when I move, you can see that I am pretty well covered here. So when I move forward, it's in pretty good shape as I move. Now, I still have a little bit of here, and a little bit of here, and a little bit of here, which we could take care of in other ways as well. So what I can do is I've got this Ultra key here. What if I add another Ultra key and get rid of this here, here, and here? That is a possibility. There's no reason that we can only have one mask. We can identify multiple colors to key out. That would be another way to get rid of it. But for simplicity's sake, I'll just continue on here because I think we're actually able to have a pretty good masking right now, just for speed's sake, so this video doesn't take forever. So we go to matte cleanup now, and we have some other choices that you can make here. If we zoom in, you'll see that I am pretty hard edged, and I kind of look like a paper cutout if you think about that. So I can go and make some choices there, like soften the edge of me just a little bit by just even 1 pixel will help to soften my edge. You can see I got a little bit of blur right there, which really does help quite a bit to remove the rest of me. Now, just looking at the footage here, let's talk a little bit about the lighting. Now, I chose the lighting. As you can see, we did light from the side and slightly from the behind, and that is because we knew we had this lighting on our cave. We didn't want a whole lot of light coming from the front because this being a cave wouldn't have that light. So we adjusted the light in this way. Now, looking at this, I would have gone ahead and adjusted the light even more, move this slightly even more behind me a little bit. The light was somewhere around here in the scene, so I would have moved it a little bit further behind, so it would have mimicked this being behind me a little more. And I might have thrown some light on my shoulders just a little bit as well. This is where I can inspect this and make some better choices. Had I not been making this footage in front of everybody like that and trying to work very quickly, maybe I could have done that to fine tune. But there are some things we can do to fine tune this even a little bit more. And so what we can do, let's kind of go back to our regular library here. Oop. There we are. Got lost there for a second. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and now add an adjustment layer. Now, adjustment layers are effectively ways to add effects or add filters to the entire footage. Otherwise, I would have to add an effect to this layer and add an effect to this layer, which I could certainly do if I wanted the different layers to have different effects. However, if I want to do an overall effect over the whole thing, like for instance, make it all black and white, an adjustment layer would be a great way to do that, especially if I had a more complex timeline where I had lots of cuts, and selecting each one and doing each one individually would be really, really time consuming, especially if I had to make adjustments to that later on afterward. Here, if I do an adjustment layer and add a filter to it, I can make an adjustment to that filter and it will cascade over the entire timeline, which there's a benefit to that. So just like any other piece of footage, I can drag and drop that over it and then pull it out over the entire timeline. And you can see that by itself, that adjustment layer does absolutely nothing. And the reason is because it has nothing on it. An adjustment layer is basically like a piece of cellophane over the top of your footage. And so until I put something there, it's invisible. So we're looking, think about the footage, we're looking down through the top. So if the adjustment layer is on the top there, we're going to look down and we're going to see through these two pieces of footage. So anything I put on here is going to affect this footage and this footage. If I were to put this adjustment layer between these two, then it would only affect what's below it. So with the adjustment layer, let's activate it. So we have it in the source. We'll go again to the history. To the effects. And this time, since we want to do a black and white, we're going to choose black and white, and we will now go to effect controls, and we will look and go to black and white. So you can see now that by adding the black and white to the adjustment layer, that it makes the entire scene black and white. Now, why would we do that? Because this scene, it was shot under two different circumstances. One is a still photograph, the other is shot in color in the studio. We could attempt to make it all the same, but one photograph is largely black and white to begin with. So making this a completely black and white image is a benefit, because you can see it automatically makes me look much more connected to the space, as opposed to where I'm in color and the scene isn't in color so much. So that's another kind of aspect to combining here. We'll do one more thing to sort of combine this, and there's lots of other things, but for the sake of this video, which is really more about just showing you the ultraKEY filter, we'll do one other thing that could help blend it, and that's going to be to add a little bit of noise to the entire frame. So again, this is footage that is shot in the studio, but then also a still image, a still photograph. And so they're going to have a different grain or pixel makeup, basically, the way they'll look, because one is moving and the other one is not. So by adding noise filter over the top of both of them, think of it almost like creating this sort of skin over the top of everything, which will help it to sort of combine and make it feel like it's in the same world. So I still have adjustment layer activated, and I will now double click on noise. And under noise, you can see it just as you want to do a very subtle bit of noise. You have choices, but since this is a black and white, I'm going to uncheck color, so it's not going to be color noise. And I'm going to zoom in on this so that we can see a little bit better. And so as I crank this up, you'll see, if I crank it way up, you'll see here's the footage as I walk in. You could see even just that as a, if it's heavy, you can see though how it blends it. You know, it looks like I'm in the same world. It's real fuzzy, of course. 74 is way too high. We would want it to be somewhere subtle, somewhere probably around 9 would be the highest, because it doesn't have to be huge. But even just that little bit there, as I play it, and this is only at half quality, as I play it, you can see it does a much better job of blending it together. Now I can make adjustments back and forth and increase it, decrease the footage in order to get a better look as I'm going. And this would be particularly if I was combining video with a still image, because the still image is not going to have the active pixel movement that a video might do. So this would be particular for that. So that is what I have for the ultraKEY. ultraKEY is, again, what we would use to key out a specific color. It doesn't have to just be green. It could be any color within an image. So If you just wanted to get rid of all the red in a particular image, that's a full color, whatever image, all the red, you could do that. And just all the red would drop out completely. So it's a way of identifying a single color or a color field, and then assigning that transparency instead of a single color. So that's that. We'll have more on the subtleties of it, more on specifically lighting that green screen so it's a little bit better, and so on. So hopefully you got enough to get started, and we'll see you in the studio. Bye now.